the reason why we do not have those who have disappeared here in the continent. Okay, I hear Anna's voice. Can we start? Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this side event. My name is Awa Balde. I am a member of the working group on enforced or involuntary disappearances, part of the special procedures. And today we are launching our latest thematic report on enforced disappearance in the context of the defense of land, natural resources, and the environment. This report was initially launched last month in Geneva during our session in Geneva, where we also presented our annual report before the Council. I'm sorry about this delay. We are just trying to adjust. And as I tell people in the African continent, we need to be flexible and go with the flow. So I thank you for that. This is one of the first things I told my colleague Anna, and she's an honorary African. So before giving the floor to Anna, perhaps I would like to just tell you, thank our partners. We are very honored to partner with Zimbabwean Lawyers for Human Rights, Committee for Justice, and defenders who always make possible the activities that we conduct here in the continent, but also join us usually in Geneva. It's this ongoing partnership is something that we cherish very much. I would also like to a warm welcome to our panelists, including Christopher Opeyo and Alvaro Del Valle, for having joined us today in this panel. As you know, for what we initially thought was we would give the opening remarks to Commissioner So, but as I said, the plenary is delayed and he will join us as soon as he's available. But without further delay, please allow me to introduce you, Ana Lorena Delgadillo Perez. As I was saying, she is a member of the working group. She represents the Americas and the Caribbean region in the working group. She joined us in 2023. She's a Mexican human rights lawyer who has championed human rights issue in the Americas for 20 years. So it was really a privilege to have her in the working group. And she is the lead in this thematic report of ours this year. Please join me to give this warm welcome. Anna, welcome to our continent. Welcome to Banjul. It's a pleasure to have you here. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you. First of all, thank you very much to the organizer of the event and all the people that are here. It is always I am very honored to be here in the Africa continent, and thank you to the organizers for the great efforts for having this event. So the report is called Enforced Disappearances in the Context of Defense of Land, Natural Resources, and Environment. And one thing that we start saying in the report is that enforced disappearances, in fact, are used to silence defenders of land, natural resources, and environment. And we were looking for the data of the numbers of these defenders that have been disappeared. And we did not find any data. That's something that is very worrisome. So data is limited or non-existent. And when we are talking about cases of the so-called short-term enforced disappearances, it's even harder to have reports or to have data. I remember talking to some of the indigenous communities in different contexts, and we were talking about enforced disappearances. And I was asking them, do you have cases of enforced disappearances? And they were telling, no, we don't have many cases of enforced disappearances. They kill them, but disappearance is not something that is happening. And I was asking them, okay, if you have protests, do they detain you? Yes, they do. And if they detain you, do they let you to communicate with your family or with your friends or with your lawyer? No, they don't allow us. Do you have some protection while you are detained? No. So then you have cases of enforced disappearances. But it's hard to see those cases. That's why it's very important to document them and to report them. So in Africa in general, we found high-risk countries, cases in Uganda, Tanzania, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Tanzania, and Uganda. The rest of the countries is not that they don't have cases, is that we don't have the information. So we need more information of cases on those countries. Some of the structural causes and risk factors that allow these disappearances to occur are the following. First, historical and structural factors such as colonial legacies, systematic marginalization and discrimination, and environmental racism. Second, institutional weakness, such as weak governance or weak institutions, corruption in state and corporate practices, and lack of legal land and resource ownership for communities. This is one of the most important risks. If the communities don't own the land, don't have the protection for owning the land and the resources, there will be always a risk. Third, violence and repression, such as systematic violence against human rights defenders and communities. We were told that in some of the communities, organized crime or governments or companies were starting conflicts. So they start the conflict, and then the disappearance come, and they have to abandon them, the communities. So this is how this thing started, when they started with this violence in the community, militarization of the territories, police alignment with corporate interests. They were telling us in the communities, yes, there are some police here in the community, but they are here to defend the companies, not to defend the people, not to defend the communities. Legal and civil space violation. For example, the criminalization of defenders. In all the regions, they were reporting this as one of the most important risks, criminalization. Misuse of criminal and anti-terrorist law against defenders. You know that now they call these defenders eco-terrorists, or they are accused to stop the countries to advance in developing, in economy, in developing. The other thing is the lack of accountability and transparency, such as impunity. There's a huge impunity on those cases. And as I said, there's more impunity even in cases of the so-called short-term enforced disappearances. Manipulated consent process and opaque business operation. So some of the groups that are more target for these disappearances are indigenous people and Afro-descendant communities who are always being discriminated and attacked for defending their lands. Some of the vulnerabilities, according to the law and to the mechanism, is that in some of the countries, they say that indigenous and local communities, they don't even have formal recognition as themselves, so they cannot defend their lands and their rights. Legal avenues for defense are very limited. Sometimes they are in places that are very far away from the institutions, and the state doesn't take any efforts to approach them. So it's like they put the obligation on the communities to approach the institution, but they never do an effort to go to the communities and to protect them from the place where they are. So imagine these communities that live with a lot of poverty, economic poverty, that are in very isolated places, going to face the institutions when they want to start a case, going to institutions that historically have discriminated them, institutions that are built, institutions and norms that are built in colonial legacies. So it's hard for them to go to the institutions to get protection. Some of the recommendations that we have on this report, we have recommendations for states, recommendations for corporations and financial institutions, and recommendations for public human rights institutions. What I will say is that this report has a very important chapter on the responsibility of business enterprises and financial institutions. When we have cases of enforced disappearances, it's hard to see them. It's hard to see that a state is starting a case of enforced disappearances when a company is linked to the enforced disappearance. So what we are saying in the report is that these business enterprises and financial institutions are obligated to act according to international law. And because enforced disappearances is a jus cogent obligations, it's obligatory for them to prevent and to act when they have an enforced disappearances. And I am saying this for the states, but also for the business enterprises. So what we are recommending here for the state, in general, we can talk about this later, to prevent the criminalization of the defenders, secure land tenure, enforce free, prior, and informed consultation, regulate corporate conduct through binding, obligatory laws aligned with the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, include anti-disappearances clause in trade agreements, ensure that reparations are holistic and with a community-centered approach. Recommendations for corporations and financial institutions. Assess risks before launching projects. Suspend operations when risks are identified for enforced disappearances. Avoid strategic lawsuits against public participation. Cooperate in prevention, searching, and investigation. And you will say, how? How can a company can cooperate in prevention, investigation, and reparation? We can talk about this in the section of question and answers. Some other recommendations for human rights institutions, national human rights institutions, they must monitor cases of enforced disappearances, and they must help us to have statistics of the enforced disappearances of these cases that occur in every country. Map harmful legislation. And we have this legislation in civil, administrative, constitutional, all around our system. We have legislation that is harmful for these defenders. Promote binding, obligatory corporate accountability frameworks. In conclusion, land, natural resource, and environment defenders are vital to our world. Their disappearances threaten human rights and global sustainability. Urgent coordination actions are needed. These defenders are confronting some of the most powerful economic, political, and criminal interests in the world. They need our protection. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Anna. And thank you so much for having chosen this topic, because it's a topic that is really relevant. It resonates greatly with our continent and the challenges during the colonial times that persist until today. Some things have changed, but not that much. And I'm also very happy and honored that after the official launch in Geneva, that the first place that you come is to the African continent, which reinforce how important this issue is in the working group for us and how relevant it is for us how Africa is relevant for us in the working group. As some of you might know, the issue of enforced disappearance remains very much invisible in our continent. And as Anna was saying earlier, the fact that she highlighted a few countries, these are the examples that we have documented, but we know for a fact that is just the tip of the iceberg, because most of the cases of enforced disappearance, including those in this context, are not reported back in our continent due to several reasons, including fear of reprisals, lack of knowledge of the procedures. And this is why it's so important to have such an event and to have the opportunity to kind of build on and to maximize the awareness raising in the continent. Without further ado, perhaps I will now give the floor to Hamed Mafred, the director of the Committee for Justice. Hamed is a legal professional and a human rights advocate specializing in international human rights law and accountability mechanisms. Ahmed, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm not sure if I can, does it work? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Awa, and thank you all for attending this important side event. And of course, thanks to Anna and for the working group for this important report. Actually, the thematic report which we are launching today here in Banjul, we are launching in Geneva in last month, and this report is very important because it's provided an essential reminder that the enforced disappearances is no longer confined to political repression, but it's become now a weapon against those who defend land, natural resources, and the environment. These who stand in the way of powerful military or economic interest. From our work at Committee for Justice, I can confirm that these are not abstract trend. They are lived realities now in many countries in Sahel and North Africa, especially Egypt, Sudan, and across many countries in Sahel as well. In Egypt, I can say that in North Sinai, the enforced disappearances have been directly linked to the forced displacement of entire communities in Rafah, Sheikh Zayed, under the pretext of creating what the military say it's a buffer zone and fighting terrorism. According to the documentation with our colleagues, Sinai Foundation for Human Rights, more than 100,000 people have been displaced, and at least 12,000 building, 12,000 building and thousands of hectares of farmland demolished between 2013 and 2020. CFJ has documented numerous cases of individuals who were forcibly disappeared simply of documenting violation against local and indigenous communities in North Sinai, or for defending the rights of displaced families to return home. One striking case in that is the case of Ahmed Hamza, a human rights defender arrested in September 2024, who remains missing till this day. Also, a lot of civilians in North Sinai, they are now arrested and sentenced to the regarding the military case number 80 of 2023, which more than 60 civilians from Rafah and Sheikh Zayed were sentenced between 3 and 10 years in prison. And also, the most important thing that is our colleagues now in Sinai Foundation for Human Rights is speaking about is what is the Sinai Foundation for Human Rights released a landmark report titled "Killed in Cold Blood," developed with the forensic article. It revealed for the first time the extent of a mass grave in North Sinai against the communities in North Sinai. This something is very worried, and we think that such kind of pattern is giving a lot of examples and a lot of proof that the government in Egypt, especially when it's coming to North Sinai, didn't respect the rights for indigenous people, as well as using the enforced disappearances against them regarding any kind of requests for getting rights or be in their land. In Sudan, since the conflict in April 2023, enforced disappearances have been increased. Together with our partner, we documented hundreds of cases of missing persons, practically from Masalat, Four, and Zagawa communities in Darfur. These communities were defending their land and the resources from Caesar, and there become a targeting of killing, kidnapping, and disappearances. In this situation, the absence of a state didn't mean safety, but we think that it meant silent approval of what was happening there. Also in Sahel, across the Sahel region, human rights defenders face component risks. They are caught between armed groups and the state security forces in areas rich in natural resources, but governed by weak institutions and intentioned impunity. Communities that speaks out against the corruption or the unfair exploitation of land and minerals are met with threats, kidnapping, and enforced disappearances, while the perpetrators, whether state agents or corporate actors, are rarely held accountable. This pattern, as the report highlighted, reflects a dangerous conflict explanation and repression. The report lies out the pattern clearly: stigmatization of defenders, complicity of state authorities, and structural impunity. From our work in Egypt, Sudan, and Sahel, we see these same realities, and they demand urgent action. We must ensure, from our perspective, after this report is published now, we must ensure that the criminalization of enforced disappearances in national law aligned with international standard, including the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances, accountability mechanism that reach beyond state agents to include corporation, investors, and financial institutions being from forced displacement and land seizure, effective protections for human rights defenders, journalists, and community leaders who expose abuses related to land and natural resources. These women and men are not only defending their own communities, they are safeguarding the future of our planet. If we allow them to be silenced through disappearances, we lose more than individual lives. We lose voices of conscience that stand between justice and exploitation. Let us ensure that their struggle is not erased in silence, but honored through truth, accountability, and justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hamad. And thank you so much for providing these lively examples and concrete situations and to exemplify our report. I think, as Anna was saying earlier, one of the, once you start talking about examples of enforced disappearance in the context of land, defense of land, environment, and natural resources, then you realize examples. And you also brought this issue of some other related consequences, for instance, the forced displacement of the communities as a result of the exploitation of land. Thank you. Without further ado, let me now call Alvaro Gomez del Valle from Frontline Defenders. Alvaro is a senior advocacy lead for Frontline Defenders. He will speak on the international and regional analysis of enforced disappearances against human rights defenders from the protection angle. He supports human rights defenders at risk. I think the work that Frontline Defenders does not need any publicity, at least not in this room. He targets mainly through national, regional, and international levels. They have also partnered with us even in Geneva, and we are happy to welcome you here. Alvaro, please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this space. And especially thanks for the working group and to Ana Lorena for doing such a good report on a topic that is sadly very, very relevant. Frontline Defenders works globally for the protection of human rights defenders. And what our data shows is that around the world, consistently, defenders working on land, environment, and natural resources are the most persecuted group globally. In Africa, for the last 3 years, our data shows that environmental defenders are the most targeted group, behind only LGBT rights defenders. In 2024, Frontline Defenders and partners documented the killings of 54 human rights defenders around the world, directly linked to corporate or to business interest. These are the cases we could verify. The real number is, of course, much, much higher. This is to say that our own analysis really resonates with the report of the working group. I really like that the report makes the point that this group is an extremely heterogeneous group. It's a very varied group. In Africa, we are talking about indigenous communities, we are talking about whistleblowers, environmental activists, youth activists, even forest rangers in some cases. Another point that the report makes that I really appreciated is that many of these people and communities don't want to become defenders. They become defenders by accident. They are forced to become defenders by states that don't respect their land rights, by companies that encroach on their territories, by armed groups that exploit their natural resources. But often they don't even think of themselves as human rights defenders. I think this is an important point because there is power in self-identifying as a human rights defender. As a human rights defender, you have, or you should have, access to international protection mechanisms, regional protection mechanisms. The international community has made commitments to your protection and to your support. Why do we say that environmental human rights defenders are particularly vulnerable to violations, including enforced disappearances? They often work in remote and rural areas, far from capitals, in places with reduced state support, reduced infrastructure, reduced investment, and that means that they are often the first line of defense against actors seeking to commit violations. And for that, they are often the first targeted by these actors. Some cases, it's even worse. The state is not absent, the state is complicit, either by acquiescence, letting them do, or by direct complicity with armed groups and with multinational corporations. This issue of geographical location and the issue of lack of access to protection intersects with different types of oppression based on race, ethnicity, religion, poverty, etc. We see this very, very clearly in the cases of indigenous human rights defenders who are defending the right to access the resources, who are advocating for the recognition of their customary land ownership. And for that, they are targeted with the dispossession of their land, with sexual violence, with enforced disappearances. We see this in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Uganda, targeting the Maasai, the Sengwer, the Batwa, the Bennett peoples. And although indigenous communities take a more collective approach to human rights defense, we still see that enforced disappearances of elders, enforced disappearances of community leaders really can disarticulate the human rights fight of many communities. I would like to speak about two trends that I think are very relevant for this: militarization and securitization. The UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights is very clear that communities need to have meaningful consultations about projects and development that impacts themselves. It's the same principle behind the free, prior, and informed consent of indigenous peoples. Instead of that, we see that the states, instead of enforcing these principles, they often rely on a model of militarization to push large extractive projects against the will of the people, using criminalization and using violence to silence any opposition. We see this in DRC, in Niger, Burkina Faso, in Mali, but it really is a repressive playbook that is used across the world in resource-rich areas, from Ecuador to Pakistan, where private security contractors, paramilitary groups, state security forces, where they are the arbiters, where they are the enforcers, we see a context of impunity. We see it's easier to discredit human rights defenders, and we see that when a defender disappears, there is no consequences for the actors that implement this. We have seen this, for example, in DRC, with defenders working on illegal mining, on exploitation of wood, that are targeted by armed groups like the M23, and are also targeted by the state authorities, frankly. It must be said that the link between militarization and enforced disappearances goes beyond those working on the environment. And I think it's worth mentioning the cases of Omar Sila and Mamadou Biloba in Guinea, who were abducted from their homes in Conakry for protesting military rule. And to this day, they remain disappeared. The second point is very linked to militarization, securitization, but and they can reinforce each other, but they are different phenomena. Whereas militarization presents threats to defenders, as we just explained, securitization tries to frame the defenders as the threats themselves. They do this by using national security legislation, by using counterterrorism legislation, and they use this to delegitimize their human rights work and to create a permissible structure for impunity against them. We've seen this, well, my colleague Christopher will speak about the situation in Uganda, but we've also seen this in Tanzania, where defenders, environmental defenders in lands that are targeted for tourism and for conservation, they are charged with terrorism. We see Cameroon, Chad, Cote d'Ivoire, all using anti-terrorism legislation. We see DRC using criminal conspiracy, arson, illegal occupation to target defenders. But this goes beyond legislation. As Ana Lorena mentioned, defenders around the world are painted as anti-development, anti-growth, anti-progress, again, to create this permission structure for violations, including enforced disappearances. In Mali, we've seen defenders being accused of being eco-terrorists. And again, this really echoes, for example, in Serbia, they have a registry of ecological terrorists as well. Once again, we see states really learning the worst practices from each other. I will wrap up with this, but just to echo the report that says that this discrediting of their name, discrediting of their work, this increased public profile because of these attacks often leads to very severe reprisals against defenders, including enforced disappearances. There's so much more to say, but I'll stick to my time and maybe we can talk in the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alvaro. It's really a pleasure to listen to you and to see how you reinforce our findings and also remind us that this is part of a, the picture that we see here in the continent is part of a global trend. You highlighted as well this issue of the vulnerability, the fact that the human rights defenders, in particular those environmental defenders, are at a special place of vulnerability, and also the fact that you mentioned the intersectionality. Sometimes we tend to forget, but it is a very important issue to be remembered when we are having this conversation. And then you mentioned as well, you gave some of the examples, and I would just like to say regarding the human rights defenders in Guinea that you mentioned last year, African Commission and the working group issue a joint press release specifically on that, because we remain very much concerned about the situation. And it also was a way of highlighting the work that we do under this framework of cooperation, Addis Ababa roadmap framework of cooperation between the special procedures and the African Commission. Our next speaker is Christopher Ofayo. He is a human rights advocate and defender from Uganda. He is an award-winning environmental human rights defender. He holds a progressive work experience in community work in oil host communities in the Western Uganda, particularly in the districts of Oima, Bulushiha. He builds the capacity of communities on human rights, natural governance, mediations, negotiation, and grievance handling mechanisms. I think it's very important to hear your testimony today, Christopher, especially because we know that much of this violation takes place in isolated communities, and you are the link sometimes to those isolated communities. Thank you for the work that you do in those communities as well. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. My name is Christopher Opio, and like I've been introduced, I come from Uganda and in the western part of the country, where currently Total Energies and the Chinese National Offshore Oil Corporation is extracting oil in collaboration with government of Uganda. I'll speak about my testimony, but also what so many of my colleagues whom I work with are going through.
Flexibility, flexibility.
Sorry. So I want to agree with the report by the working group that there is limited documentation, especially when it comes to enforced disappearances for people that are defending land, natural resources, and defending rights, especially for communities. That I agree with you. Even for the first time.
Proceed, please.
Let's give you the floor. We know you're very busy. Please.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Please allow me to give the floor to Commissioner So. As you know, he should be leaving very soon. Thank you for that. And thank you, everyone here for your flexibility. Once again, I always say, when we work in the African continent, we need to remain flexible. Commissioner So has graciously agreed to join us. It's truly an honor, and it's an honor and a pleasure to have Commissioner So in this panel. Commissioner So, the chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Let's just congratulate for his election. It's it's truly an achievement that brings joy to all of us in the human rights field here in Africa and beyond. He has been our partner in the continent, has provided us for a space to expand and on the issues of the work that we do, especially on issue of enforced disappearance. He has taken the lead in the continent, and I follow his leadership on this. The Honorable Commissioner Idrissa So, in addition to being the chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, he is Senegalese, my neighbor, and he joined the African Commission in 2021 and was sworn in November 21. He is also the chairperson of the Working Group on Death Penalty, Extrajudicial Summary, and Arbitrary Killings and Enforced Disappearances. Commissioner So has expertise in law of international organizations, human rights litigation, international criminal law, community law, justice, rule of law, fundamental rights, public international law, and administrative litigation. He currently works as a counselor of the Supreme Court of Senegal. Thank you, Commissioner So. The floor is yours. We are truly honored that you have made it to this event. Vous pouvez parler en français,
Yeah.
de traduction.
Good afternoon, everybody. I get permission to speak in French. Alors, je voudrais vous saluer tous respectueusement et vous dire mes regrets d'avoir interrompu vraiment ceux qui étaient en train d'intervenir. Nous sommes dans un agenda très chargé, mais j'ai tenu à vraiment tenir une promesse. J'avais fait la promesse à Awa et à nos amis du groupe de travail que je viendrai partager quelques mots avec eux. C'est toujours un plaisir parce que au sein de la commission, je suis en charge de la question des disparitions forcées. Et depuis le début de mon mandat, j'ai bénéficié vraiment d'une collaboration très franche avec les membres du groupe de travail sur les disparitions forcées. Avec qui ce sont nos partenaires sur la feuille de route d'Addis Abeba, qui, comme vous le savez, est un cadre de coopération entre les organes de la Commission africaine et les organes onusiens sur les questions de droits de l'homme. Donc, ma présence ici, c'est juste pour venir vous dire vraiment tout l'intérêt de la commission sur l'étude qui a été élaborée par le groupe de travail et présentée une première fois à Genève. J'y étais, ils m'ont fait l'aimabilité et la gentillesse de m'inviter. J'ai eu à prendre la parole. Alors, pour cette fois-ci, je suis désolé, je ne pourrai pas développer davantage sur les questions de fond. C'était juste du point de vue protocolaire pour venir vous saluer, vous dire que nous attendons avec attention de partager, avec intérêt de partager les résultats de l'étude qui a été élaborée sur la question des disparitions forcées en rapport avec les défenseurs des droits de l'environnement et de la protection des ressources naturelles. En tout cas, je vous souhaite de fructueuses délibérations et reste disponible pour échanger. Je suis désolé, je dois quitter parce que je suis attendu de l'autre côté, mais je tenais quand même à être là pour vous saluer et vous dire bonne continuation. Voilà, merci. Plaisir.
So I am so sorry, Christopher, but you understand the urgency, and I think all of us does. Thank you for having interrupted your very important testimony for us today. Please proceed. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so I was saying that I agree with the report, especially where it highlights that there is limited documentation of enforced disappearances in the context of land and natural resources. And this is true even in my country, in my community. And then the other thing that I want to agree with is that the definition of enforced disappearances, even to me and so many people, meant someone who is picked and they are disappeared for so many days, maybe they don't even return. But when we talk about short disappearances, it is too common, especially for our case. Dear defenders, first of all, I am speaking as a grassroots community defender and a frontline defender that has been working in this space for the last 10 years now. And in these 10 years, I have faced several challenges in the work that I do. We live under a constant fear of being arrested without cause, fear of disappearing without a trace, and fear of never receiving justice. Even in my case, peaceful protest can land you into trouble. Several times I've been arrested, my colleagues have been arrested. And the unfortunate part of it is that when you're picked today, they'll produce you to court after a week or two against our law, because in my country, the law says that if someone is arrested, they must be produced in court after 48 hours. And sometimes it takes beyond 48 hours. This is not unique to us, according to the working group. on enforced disappearance and involuntary disappearances. Enforced disappearance of land, natural resources, and environmental defenders often occur in contexts marked by violence, repression, systematic marginalization. Defenders who speak out are branded by states as anti-development, terrorist, or eco-terrorist. These narratives are not accidental. They are carefully designed to protect state and the cooperation. This is what is happening in my community. We've been tagged anti-progress. We've been tagged saboteurs. And this thing, unfortunately, go to the community. And the community that we come from, they are very vulnerable, and I can say very gullible, because this is the narrative that is propagated in my community, that the people that are standing up to say no to the fossil fuel that is happening within protected areas. For instance, in my community, of the 400 oil wells that is being operated by Total Energies, 140 is within Mashishon Falls National Park. And because of that, the park has been open to several traffic and activities. So, and when you come up to speak, they tag you as a saboteur, as anti-progress. It is even worse now, because my country right now is in the process of election, and the government in power is saying that the oil and gas is a savior for the country. So anyone that speaks about it right now, it has even become more dangerous. In my own context, we have been repeatedly called troublemakers and anti-development. Surveillance, both physical and digital, adds another layer of fear. Many of us are being followed, monitored, and intimidated by security personnel or unknown individuals. I have personally experienced direct threats to my life. This intimidation restricts not just our movement, but our solidarity, our advocacy, which is rooted, by the way, like someone said, myself, I became a human rights defender by circumstance under which our land was being taken. My land was affected in 2012, and 7,018 people were displaced from that land. And this is how we find ourselves defending, because we were being displaced from the land to pave way for construction of an oil refinery. And because we were standing up to speak, a lot of us were silenced. Now, this even becomes worse for women defenders. I have a video of a documentary that we made, and women environmental defenders will tell you that they are facing so many challenges, including derogatory names such as motor-moused, prostitutes. They tell you that you speak so much, who will marry you? Anyway, are you even married, or do you even have children? And this thing go beyond just the words, but sometimes affecting them mentally, and there is mental distress that we are witnessing in my community. On top of this, digital surveillance is growing, hacking, monitoring of emails, and cyber intimidation of us. Even the tools we rely on, for instance, my constitution is very clear in Article 29 that gives us right to a peaceful assembly. Unfortunately, you cannot do it in my context. On 26th of last year, in August, we organized a peaceful protest, and unfortunately, most of us were picked, from that. And the same government is using colonial rules. We have what they call public nuisance. Actually, most of us have been charged with public nuisance, which is in our penal code. They pick you because you are peacefully protesting and saying no, then you're taken and charged for public nuisance. So enforced disappearance starts like that. And for so many of us, we have colleagues. I have colleagues, I don't want to mention their name because of the risks. We have colleagues in my own community who were picked, some for 2 weeks, and then they were disappeared and then reappeared. There is one who was picked and disappeared for 3 weeks, and then he was dropped in our neighborhood. So these things are happening, and they are happening in the names of saying that we are saboteurs, we are anti-development, that we are not supposed to be. Actually, they say we are promoting foreign interest. And my question has always been, it is the same government which saying that we are promoting foreign interests, and yet the people that the company that is conducting extractives, for instance, right now it's a foreign company. Total, we know very well, comes from France, and Sinop comes from China, and yet they say we are the one, we are defending our rights, our land. They say we are promoting foreign interests. The ones who have given licenses to the company, which is a foreign company, is saying a different thing. So, colleagues, I stand here today for many whose voices have been silenced, those who were taken in the night, those who have returned, and those who continue to face daily threats. We owe them not just remembrance, but action. Reparation must mean real change, a justice system that works, laws that protect instead of prosecuting. I have told you they have used actually strategic litigation against our participation. Even for communities, I have 2 cases where communities were taken to court by government to secure land rights for the companies. And these cases do not take even a week in court. It is decided very fast. But as community, myself, I went to court in 2014 for some of the violations for our rights of our land. Up to today, that case has never been decided. And yet so many of us have been intimidated. The case is coming back again on 31st of this month, still for hearing. And yet government have taken people to court, and within a week, the case is concluded and land is given to the companies to do work. I will stop here because of time, and then we can interact during the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christopher, for such a powerful testimony. There's no way that I can summarize the main points of this. All of it was just bringing to life what this report, what was the aim of this report. Maybe just to remind you about the women human rights defenders and their special place of vulnerability, and also this growing tendency of short-term enforced disappearances that we see across the spectrum. It's not specifically in this topic, but states are changing their tactics. Maybe also as human rights defenders, we need to change ours. And this is what we are trying to do with the studies that we do, with the brainstorming, with the meetings such as this. It helps us see how we can move forward as the tactics of the states grow more sophisticated. Without further ado, let me introduce Tino Muda Shoko. She is a practicing human rights lawyer from Zimbabwe. She is part of Zimbabwe Human Rights Team. She's a litigation manager at Zimbabwe Human Rights Team and has conducted numerous lawyers training sessions on enforced disappearances. Shoko has responded to several cases involving enforced disappearances and other human rights violations, advocating for justice and protection of civil liberties in the country. Welcome. Thank you very much, Tino, for being here with us.
Thank you, Awa. I stand on the protocol that has been observed before. And I think what we must acknowledge is across Africa, our challenges relating to resources are the same. And at the center of it, there are laws, there are policies, and there are justice systems that are not treating the HRDs, the victims, and the families or those that are disappearing in a fair manner. And the question then is, what is the role of lawyers in all this, in assisting the victims of the enforced disappearances and the victims of the enforced disappearances? And I must acknowledge what Chris said, that you realize that in Africa, we have an increased number of women HRDs that are standing out, that are speaking out against these issues. And they suffer and bear the most work because they take care of the families and the communities, and they even protect communities where culturally they are not accepted as the owners of the resources because of the patriarchal societies where they come from. And some of them are even arrested when they are standing out and trying to protect these resources. But how do we then come in as the lawyers? What services and what assistance do we offer? And the first thing that comes to me is this has to be swift, it has to be fast, it has to be rapid. Because from the panelists, you heard that the enforced disappearance may not be the initial target or the result, but in the process, because it's delayed, it's continuous, then it becomes in case of enforced disappearance, some of the people never come back. So it has to be swift, or else those victims continue to suffer more harm or they disappear for good. So the lawyers have to be prepared to offer legal representation. In cases where people are facing the criminal charges, they should be prepared to represent and to go through the criminal justice process representing those clients. And secondly, in a case where a person is being held unlawfully, it is critical that lawyers be prepared to make a habeas corpus application. This is done by lawyers who understand, one, the system that they are operating in, the dynamics, because usually you'll discover that in most countries, it is not the police that usually do these abductions. It's those members of the intelligence that carry out this work, or those people that are living with impunity. And they simply know that when we are done with these abductions, with these abuses, we simply hand over these cases to the police. And some of these people are even held in places that are not holding facilities. So it is necessary that a habeas corpus application is done urgently to ensure that whoever is holding that person releases them to lawful custody. And it is also critical for lawyers to collect evidence and documentation. When you then talk of reparations, when you talk of damages, you cannot pursue those cases without evidence, without statistics, because remember that these corporations, when they come, they know that these challenges will continue. They know that the land where they want to get the oil, where they want to get the gold, where they want to get the resources, there are communities that are already there. So they do their proper research and they get the best lawyers. So we also, as the lawyers or the lawyers that are working on these cases, need to collect evidence in preparation for challenges and cases that would then come. The worst injustice that lawyers would then do is probably having to appear before a hearing or maybe before an inquiry with information that is insufficient. And we let down the communities that are then looking up to the lawyers for the assistance because there is nothing to rely on. So evidence is key. And in the process, all of this to protect these communities. Half the time lawyers simply go to court because they want to win a case, but they don't look at the damage that they do to the victims. So in this whole process, the lawyers should be able to protect the victims to ensure that over and above the evidence that is being shared and given out, is it strategic considering the safety? Because once you leave the courtroom, once you leave the inquiry, those people have safety issues that have to be considered as well. And it is also necessary to help these victims to go through the investigations and the prosecutions with them. Some of the investigations can take years. People disappear, and definitely governments, even when they have the evidence, they'll say, we are still doing some more investigations. Or when the investigation is done, the report is never published. You know it's there, but no one is going to release that report. And any person who tries to claim or try to even approach a court seeking that particular report, it is never released. So we need to work with these clients through this process to ensure that we are present. And it's easier when it's done by people that understand the steps and the correct offices that they have to be knocking. And the most critical thing is assisting these communities to address their legal status. Some of them, they are just communities that are told, you don't own this land. From where I come from, communities are told all the land is vested in the president. You don't own this land. You don't have title deeds. You can be moved anytime. So how best do you then protect these communities to make sure they have a voice, they have a claim to their resources? What laws and what basis do they have? And some of these are community-based organizations that don't have any advice, any support, and they need that support from organizations that work with lawyers, from the lawyers themselves, so that they are able to claim, because maybe for them it's just a union of women simply protecting just their small resources, or maybe they're even just protecting a small garden that they are getting food from. But someone is seeing much more that is under that particular land that is benefiting that community. So they need the support, even support that goes to resources as well. How are they then protected? And lawyers also need to be prepared to do strategic litigation, to be thoughtful, tactful, and target certain unintended results, to say this is what we want to do, but how best do we protect these communities, starting from what we have identified and the result that we want to do. The laws might not be there, but we can also rely on international laws. We can rely on judgments and cases decided in other jurisdictions, so that we build even on our local jurisprudence and the protection of communities. And the most important thing is lawyers should be prepared to challenge these corporations. They should be prepared. Because like I said when I started, corporations actually do their research before they come into the communities. They know who to pay. They know who to talk to. They know the big names that they need to give something, so that they keep quiet and they don't say anything. So we need to be prepared as the lawyers, so that we can then also protect the communities. And it is also critical that lawyers also prioritize regional and international advocacy. One thing that the states do not want is peer review. A state doesn't want to go to a platform where their people are talking or raising their issues. So they will try as much as possible to wear a good name and carry a good report. But it is also critical that the lawyers appreciate these regional mechanisms, this international mechanism, so that even when they get to those platforms, you have proper evidence and you are speaking to things that you are aware of, and a system that you can well utilize as well. But the other thing that I was thinking about is, are we saying the lawyers are the heroes in all this? No, the lawyers cannot do it on their own. When we are talking of enforced disappearances, the families, they suffer so much abuse, even from the perpetrators. When these cases are taking place, the families, they suffer trauma. They are at the forefront of this abuse. So we also need to work with psychologists, with counselors, with doctors, because we cannot talk of evidence gathering without connecting to the doctors in cases where we need medical evidence for the cases that we'll be taking to court. And the media industry is critical. The cases that we take to court, we really need to work with the media, with the journalists, to make sure that our results, our advocacy is shared out there, because the lawyers themselves cannot do it without the support of all these other partners. Thank you.
Clearly, it's a litigator with decades of experience, already strategizing how to use the report. Thank you so much, Tino. Maybe just to say a few things about this swift intervention. This is also something that we notice in the working group. The sooner we receive cases, the higher the likelihood of this victim reappearing alive. It's important to mention that. The issue that you mentioned about the power imbalance between the communities and this corporation, it's good that to have teams like yourself who assist and look that assist the communities that are clearly in disadvantage. And one of the other things that you also mentioned, the title deeds, our traditional way of owning land, it's quite incompatible with the modern era. I think it's an issue that as human rights defenders, as lawyers, as we need to think through how to assist better the communities. Again, the value of maximizing your voices through the use of international and regional human rights mechanisms can never be overemphasized. I know that we were supposed to be between 1 to 2, and we are already running late, and I apologize for that. We come to an end of the intervention of the panelists, but I would like to open the floor for 2 to 3 questions, and then I'm going to give each panelist 1 minute, and then give Ana Lorena 3 minutes. If you all agree, this would add up to around maybe an additional 10 minutes for us to finalize this interesting panel, which I'm sure next time has to be for 2 hours, not 1. So the floor is open. If you would like to ask a question, please state your name and ask a very short question so that we keep up with the time. There is a gentleman here in front.
I would love this session to really extend because this is very serious and it's very close to my heart. The names are John Koroma from Sierra Leone, and all the speakers have actually presented the materials very well. Land, environment, natural resources are very sensitive issues, which none of us in this room could easily dismiss. I share my concerns with Christopher from Uganda, and I want to say here in this hall that we are facing such situation in Sierra Leone. Well, I'm not actually up in land or environmental activism. I'm in human rights activism, but land is also part of an overriding concerns. Because we have seen in a situation wherein people are unjustly imprisoned because of speaking out against land issues, land grabbing. And as you rightly said, the issue of land in my own situation, the chiefs own the land. Nobody owns the land, the chief owns the land. And for you to access a land, or plot of land, or piece of land, you must go through the chief. And we have seen situations wherein it has boiled down to series of tensions. And that aspect of the IFIs, that's international financial institutions, as was explained by you, for us, we see it as very, very, very unfortunate for most communities because the social corporate responsibilities which some of these companies should put in place is lacking. And if they see someone pushing too far, you might be stepping on the toes of government or those in power. And we have seen situations where people have been just abused or being molested or being imprisoned because they want to stand up for the rights of the indigenes. I give you an example. In my community, I'm coming from the south, there is an oil company that is actually exporting palm oil after the process has already been done to Malaysia. We have one of the best palm oil, if not the best overall. And that land has been leased for 99 years. You can imagine, if you take any piece, not to speak of a leaf or a log from that land, you are in trouble. People cannot fetch firewood. They cannot do anything on that land because it has already been leased. This document in my hand, this is our 1991 Constitution, which has still not been reviewed. Former government, civil society have pushed for the 1991 Constitution to be reviewed. And the element of land is heavily documented in this book, in this document. We want to see the situation wherein we can review and get people not being arrested unjustly. Environmental activists, civil society activists are not subjected to issues because they want to speak out for the community people. And I want to really see the situation where I can join my brother from the Committee of Justice to see how we can really bring out a lot of sensitization and awareness raising, because that's the area lacking. How our people from those communities can be empowered. Intellectually, they must know what is happening around them because the literacy rate is so big, so wide, that those that are fortunate to go to schools are in small minority. as opposed to the majority that are not schooled. So let's see how we can really open up the discussion and see how we can interact, collaborate, and take up this one. I've not set eyes on the document. Let me stop here so far, please.
So I'm very sorry to cut you short. I'm told, because with the generous support of our partners, we initially got this room, then we extended the room, which was a very smart decision. But that said, we have to leave this room in 3 minutes. So, but we have refreshments that will be served. What I would like to invite you is please join us. Before that, I'm going to give the floor to my colleague, Anna Lorena, to close this session for us. But let's continue this conversation during the refreshments. If I can just add, John, Sierra Leone doesn't have the best palm oil. That comes from Guinea. Now the floor goes to Anna, please. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you to all for being here. I think this is an starting conversation. I invite you to be this an starting conversation because we need to learn a lot about what is happening and about what are the strategies that we need to put in practice to protect those who are protecting our rights. I will just say one thing. The report is there, and it's our choice to make it a living document. And making a living document is on this document. Take whatever the document is telling to you to do with it to protect what you are protecting and sharing with some other the good practices that you have using the report. I will say as a last thing, because I shared this in another panel and people were very interested on this. In April 2025, the Working Group on Enforced Disappearance, together with some other special procedure, we sent an allegation letter to France and to Niger for the human rights violations committed during the mission Central Africa in 1898. As I said in the panel now in the commission, I invite you to read these documents because if we want to understand how enforced disappearances is affecting generation after generation, you have there one document from United Nations that was sent to France and to Niger. We could do this in many other countries. I am thinking in my own country, in Mexico. So please, let's use the document and let's share with others the good practices because we need to defend those who are defending our rights. Thank you very much to everyone.
Will be served. Please join us as we continue this conversation.